All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Um, Wonderful May weather that we're having. Welcome to this addition to the Rotary E Club of Southeast USA and Caribbean's monthly meeting. And I might be a few days off, but I could shout Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. The gist of our meeting tonight is disaster preparedness, and we have two speakers. Um, both friends. One, geez, I get to see him every day. So I think he's going to do a pretty good job. And he's done this before. Um, this has actually become almost a club tradition. Every May I ask, well, can you do your disaster preparedness talk? And he always says yes. And then this year, though, we've got a twist. Uh, Past District Governor Vince Cataro, who is a retired city planner for Cape Coral, is going to talk about what Cape Coral went through with Hurricane Ian. And we're going to meld the two, they're going to meld the two talks together. So without further ado, I am going to turn the meeting over to the guys. Will, if you'd like to start, go ahead.
Okay. So let me first welcome our guests, and particularly past District Governor Jim Hunt and my brother, past Exalted Ruler Tim Miller. And great to see you guys. And we're gonna rock and roll here. Oops. Uh-oh. Oh, come on. This thing worked perfect a minute ago. Okay, here we go. I'm calling this part 3 because I've done this for the club twice before. Each one is a little different. This one I think is going to be particularly appropriate because Vince is going to talk about an actual event as opposed to anything theoretical. So that I think is particularly good. Hope everybody by the time we're done knows why most folks don't prepare, and what does that really mean, and a few things that you can do. 60% of people just about anywhere don't prepare for anything. They don't prepare for financial, they don't prepare for energy, they certainly don't prepare for disasters. And part of it is looking at the reward versus the risk and spending that amount of money, whatever amount it may take to do the minimum. And so it's better just take a Caribbean cruise. And but aside, just hope for the best. So one of my favorite sayings: suppose we just do nothing and magic happens. Generally doesn't work. Uh, what what we see coming, of course, we've already had a pandemic in Florida. We got flooding and tornadoes and almost all the rest of it. Have not really had to riot civil unrest, although the way the colleges are going. So planning does help the panic preparation, the uncertainty, and the pain of recovery. And it's going to happen. Something's going to happen. The question is your plan this guy? But before you criticize him too much, he's got like 5 different kinds of beer and their toilet paper there, so he's not totally unprepared. Some of the reasons why people don't prepare: they believe it won't happen here. There are people in this part of Florida who believe that either the Greek Orthodox Church or the old Indian burial grounds or some mythical lodestone off the coast will divert hurricanes, or that whatever happens, we got technology to fix it, or the feds are going to step in, or what happens, and or my insurance will cover the losses. Yes, you and the other 10,000 people who are also waiting for a contractor. Hard to believe that poor public awareness is actually a problem, but it is. And, some people don't like to spend any money preparing, or they overestimate what they're capable of, or underestimate the risk. And then there are low probability events. And a lot of folks think, well, some Somebody else will take care of the problem. So those are all kinds of reasons. Hopefully none of us fall into that category. But when it happens, it is a major event. And I'm going to let Vince Cotero, past governor, talk about what happened in 2022 in Cape Coral. Average elevation 3 feet. Vince, it's all
Thanks,
yours.
Will. Thanks, Will, and good evening to everybody. The experience in Cape Coral was unlike others that I've been through. I raised my hand when Dick asked the question about 7 or 8 or 9 or something like that, but I was just going back, and it's been at least 5 for me named major hurricanes, and this one was up there with the rest, and I was able to work, or I had to work my government capacity on the others. The only one I didn't was Charlie. I was in the private sector then, but as far as preparations on a personal level and so forth, I, of course, was involved in that with my family. But when you work for the government, you just go and you're on the clock 24/7. So in this particular one, like hurricanes that had occurred in Florida over the past maybe 15 years prior, um, administrators and elected officials were declaring emergencies as soon as um, the storm became a threat, even well before it got to Florida. And I wanted you to hear that from me because I'm going to focus on that in a little bit and what that means and what some of the problems were. Um, you can see on the map on the left, that deals with uh, flooding potential in the areas. But you'll notice on some of these, when you look at the Weather Channel or other news outlets, when something is coming um, and Florida's in the way, in the path, the whole state, almost virtually the whole state, becomes a target, no matter where it hits and what angle, because of what it does after it hits and wind and how that impacts the communities and then flooding. On the right is some of our waterfront development right in the middle of marshland and wetlands that were impacted. You go to the next slide, Will. So after the hurricane, and these numbers are actually up to date through 22, and I gave a presentation on this not long ago at the University of Illinois. I was invited back as an alum, and they hadn't updated the numbers, but they may be updated now. So we're going to say $1 billion. It was just under a billion in federal funds. And the majority of that was low interest disaster loans from the United States Business Administration. And then about 338 million, probably more now, in FEMA grants. And there were just under 200,000 homeowners and renters approved for aid. I'm guessing that number is over 200,000. You see the picture there is a little bit of the devastation that occurred in some of the multifamily buildings that we had. You can go to the next one. So and the photo there shows those. You may have seen them coming up and down the highways in any community where you live if you've experienced a hurricane. These are it's like a double wide trailer that trash is picked up and loaded into, and then they go up and down the highways all day long. And we saw hundreds of those going up and down the highway. And you're over 85 million with debris removal, which was the biggest issue at first that was reported by residents. These things tend to go in waves, and we saw that in Cape Coral. It's immediately help me get my power back on, and if water is gone, get that. Then the lights have to come on and all of that. And then right after that, everybody has, okay, we know it's going to take time. And then boom, the community gets bombarded with debris. Well, what do you mean? I got my power on. We got water and everything. I want the debris picked up. There were piles and piles for months all over the place, and there's still some signs and traffic lights that haven't been fixed. So it's unfortunate, but all of these things are prioritized, and the money does come in from the federal government, but even though that takes time, communities find a way to do it. From what I've seen, and doing this a long time, but the citizens, their level of comfort and their ability to speak out and complain, maybe a too harsh a word, complain, but register concerns, runs in cycles. It's like get all my health and safety stuff right away, and then after that, my road better be clear, and the government has to prioritize. So the challenges are, how fast are they going to reopen businesses and housing? I was in Hurricane Wilma working for the city of Marco Island, and it came in as a 3, and the city manager had everybody report, I think with the exception of 15 employees. It was a small city government. We only had about 225 employees. So police were in the police department, fire in the fire stations, but the rest of us were in the Marriott. And we got there the night before, and we had to stay for 2 days. That building was moving. And the city manager said that he would not have done that if it came in as a 4, or the reports looked like it was going to come in as a 4. So we had alternative plans, though. We were going to stay at a community college, used to be called Edison. It's now, what is it, Florida Southwestern University or college. And they have campuses in Fort Myers and Naples and Port Charlotte. And we were going to, they put like 150 cots out in the gymnasium at the school. So we had a backup plan, and that's where all of our computers went. But we went to the hotel, and he made us go out and do damage assessment on homes and structures when the winds dip below 60 at 59. And we were out there, and wind was just, howling. And my cell phone was ringing from family members, things like that. And they go, what's that noise? And I'm like, it's the wind. His goal was, we're getting people in the businesses, and they were open for 3 days real quick. And then there was a major issue with salt water in the transformers, and a lot of them blew. So power went out for 2 days, but that 3 days was enough for the business community to really compliment city government, even though what we did was really dangerous, dodging traffic lights. I mean, traffic lights at eye level in front of your car and things like that. And, it became an issue. So it's really a challenge getting the businesses open, because they want to be in. I found out later my boss was in the big one in South Carolina. It wasn't Ivan, that was in Florida. Hugo, years ago, and he got into a lot of trouble for not acting quickly, and it may have cost him his job. And he swore that would never happen again. So there's a backstory there. But housing becomes a really big issue, and FEMA and the city and the counties work together. But most of that is through money through individuals rather than FEMA. I hate to use the term, but they still use it. It's FEMA trailer parks. We set up one in the community. We had another one ready to go near City Hall, but they didn't want to do it. Ironically, because they didn't want to go through all of our permitting requirements, and they're a pretty bureaucratic agency. Waste disposal, road repair, roof repair, major issues, and getting the power back on, which was able to come back pretty quickly. Although with Ian, there was a dispute between Florida Power and Light and Lee County Electric Co-op. Lee County Electric Co-op has all of the Cape. FPL has areas around it, Fort Myers, unincorporated areas in Lee County, and they work cooperatively. But there was some dispute. To this day, there's still a dispute about how fast LCEC looked for help from them. And Florida Power and Light said they don't want our help, with the bucket trucks and so forth. The governor got involved. There was a lot of bad blood, but they finally got the job done. But there's private contractors that are on the road constantly. That's what they do around the country to provide help. Traffic signal restoration and repair took a long time. It really did. And the county got hit with that. So every piece of government really had their piece of the pie and their blame and so forth. But that was a big issue, the traffic signals. The county does it here. The city does not. Even all the lights in the cities in Lee County, every light is approved by the county and inspected by the county. You can go to the next slide. This is a typical photograph of what happened on roadways, especially roadways that are in the flood zone. Just complete destruction of the infrastructure there. So one of the things that is constantly under review are the building codes. They change all the time, and there's a slide at the end that I put in that shows what I'm talking about here. But if you looked in the middle of that slide where I have infrastructure hardening, reinforced roads, and drainage system, that's where the city and other governments are spending a lot of their money. Resiliency, to harden the infrastructure, because it's going to happen. It's going to happen again. The drainage system and the roads are just being taxed so much, and it's going to happen. Let's try to be resilient as possible. Education is still always an issue. The county runs the shelters too. They don't like to open them because when they do, they really go into completely unsanitary situations for after 3 days. And they try to open the shelters only for people who need them, people that have disabilities where they can't stay in their home or travel, or people that have special needs that are not accommodated in other ways. There's the issue with pets and whether they should be there or not, and so forth. Who's going to clean them? It always seems like that issue is not handled. Now, getting volunteers and handing out water and blankets and flashlights and getting people on phone trees and all that, government clockwork, because they have so many people that volunteer. Not-for-profit agencies get involved, faith-based organizations get involved. But when you talk about who wants to go and clean the school cafeteria that's being used as a shelter or auditorium, better yet, that's where they have to get the government employees. Very few volunteers want to do that. Damage assessment. This was probably the root of all the problems. And if you live in Southwest Florida, you'll know what I'm talking about here, but I don't think many of you do on the call. FEMA notified 5 cities in the county, including Cape Coral. There are 7, and the county itself. So that's 6 of 8 governments on March 28th, and said, y'all failed. We're changing what we call your community rating system, which is a program that you can participate in voluntarily. It's called the National Flood Insurance Program. And we rate you. And 1 is the best. There's very few that are 1. 10 is the worst. You're rated on what you do, how you operate your building department, your fire department, your emergency management program, codes, stormwater management, drainage, infrastructure that I have here. What is your preparedness like? And we were at a 5, and most communities in Florida are at 4 or 5, which is good. You get a 25% discount. If you're a 1, you get like a 40, your residents get 40% discount on flood insurance. And if you're a 10, you get nothing. I think a 9, they might get 5%. So it ranges from like 5 to 40. That's huge. That's huge dollars. They're in a major political fight with FEMA right now, and they got both senators, congressmen, local elected officials, and appointed officials, city managers, county managers. working with FEMA to try to get this changed. It comes down to FEMA stating that too many people were building back without building permits. Can't control that to a certain extent, but that's where the fight is right now. And I think, excuse me, I think they're going to reach a compromise. The city of Cape Coral and the other jurisdictions right now they've issued like 250 code enforcement violations for people that just started building without permits, and they're going in and doing it retroactively. I think they're going to reach a compromise. They'll get part of their discount back. They'll probably rate them a 7 and give them a remedial action plan. That's what I think is going to happen. But the city is countering by saying, we asked for help. We asked for you to send building inspectors, and you didn't, especially when we needed them. And the state is saying, the federal government is saying, you're not supposed to do damage assessment unless you have FEMA people out there. And we're like, well, the governor declared it a disaster area. And once the governor declares a disaster area, we can do damage assessment. So there's a timing issue on that. And I said a few minutes ago, these are done very early in the process. I read today that the governor has already declared emergencies in a general emergency, not individual county citywide, but general emergencies for the storms that are being predicted. So legally, that has an impact. Where that goes, I don't know, but that's part of the equation. Next slide. This is a typical area on the water that was damaged, and you can see that structure's hanging on for dear life. I'm sure it was demolished. Just an idea of what we have. Now, this is the photo I was telling you about. Look in the background. You see some roofs that aren't touched. And then you've got an area where the winds came through and ripped out part of the roof there. And then, of course, the pool cage area was completely obliterated, which is very common. Even though they're built to a code standard too, they're just not built the same, as you know. I did some checking, and the house in the foreground that has the severe roof damage was built before some of the newer building codes that impacted roofing. Now, this isn't always the case. You can have a brand new roof that's built like Fort Knox and it can be blown off. You know, you get 150 mile an hour winds. You're not going to be safe, or you may not be, but I took that one for a reason, because in that immediate area, you don't see a whole lot of damage except in 2 spots, and they're in the same house. So, and the pool cage on the one in the background, you can see is still up right by the canal. So just an idea. Next slide. This is not Cape Coral. It's an unincorporated community called Matlacha, which is between Western Cape Coral and Pine Island, which is an island in unincorporated Lee County. Matlacha had the reputation of being like little Jimmy Buffettville. Along that corridor, and you'll have to use your imagination, what's left of the bridge, if you just made believe the bridge kept going to the foreground, there were shops and little bungalow homes around there, and restaurants and stuff like that. Tourists filled every weekend. There was a city boat ramp near there. It was just a fun place to hang out. The locals were very, different lifestyle. Let's just say bucolic. I think, Will, you'll like that word, right? Very afraid of government. Every time a big development came by near them in Cape Coral, they came out in mass and protested. Very environmentally conscious community, water quality, that kind of thing. So the bridge is gone, and then Army Corps comes in and says, well, it's going to be 6 to 8 months before a temporary comes in. And those people have no way to get anywhere except by boat from Pine Island, and even in Matlacha, in that particular immediate area. So a local contractor went in and just said, no, we're not putting up with that. They built a temporary bridge in 3 days. I don't have a picture of it. I should get one. And they cut a deal with Army Corps that they could keep going as long as Army Corps had inspectors out there every day, and made sure that they built it to code, because the bridge in 3 days was temporary just to be able to start open commerce up again and as a transportation route. And then they were able to solidify it, and it's up and running now. But yeah, that's what a category 4 did. Sanibel Island Bridge was not was separated in 2 places, and Army Corps got with the contractors very quickly. I think the same company did it on Sanibel, but they worked with Army Corps, and they got that patched up as well. Okay, next slide. This is typical. You have boats in people's front yards, backyards, and you know um, after Hurricane Wilma, which I'm going back to like 2017, there were quite a few that were blown onto people's property, and we heard that one property owner, was inspecting his property, and his property was vacant, and he ended up with a boat about that size on it, so he fenced it in. Possession's 9/10 of the law. I don't know where that went legally, but it's like, well, it's on my property, it's my boat now. You can see a car underneath that one and all that. You can go to the next slide. So this was the reason the word anecdotes there is because I had already set my presentation, which is a much longer one I used when I was at the University of Illinois, and it had already gone to press. And we found out about this in late March. So I added another slide in and called it the anecdote. 5 local governments had their rating system, which is, again, how you're compared to other communities in a voluntary program called National Flood Insurance Program. It's been around over 40 years, and all the communities in Lee County participate. I believe every community in Southwest Florida does, and it's a way to get discounts on insurance. And the score was changed from 5 to 10. Every community had a 5, and they all went to 10. Coincidence? I don't know. Sanibel and Fort Myers escaped. There's all kinds of local speculation as to why. I think we would be naive to not consider politics in this, but it is what it is. And each one of the communities has their challenges. And Cape Coral's was they're dealing with FEMA now, saying you didn't come in strong enough with packets of information on telling people where they can build, how they can build, what they can do. The 50% rule, which I'll explain in a minute. But one thing that they were supposed to do that they didn't do was come in and mark the high water. They were supposed to depict the high water marks. That's important in building back. We need to know where the high water marks were. They're certified to do it. Our people aren't, or the people in the city. The 50% rule basically says, and it's a federal rule, and if you participate in this program, you must adopt it in your local codes. It says that if your home is damaged in a storm, whether it's named or not, a hurricane, a disaster, a storm, and you build back more than 50% of the value of the structure, you must meet new FEMA regulations. So for a lot of people in low-lying areas, that means building it up. And that's a lot of money. That's tens of thousands of dollars. The structural value, you can get there in numerous ways. You use the local property appraiser's data, but you can challenge that and get a private appraiser. And a lot of people do that because it shaves thousands of dollars off. But if you've got more than 50%, you've got to meet the new code. That's where a lot of people threw up their hands. They came in with, older homes built in the 70s. They said the value of my land is about 300,000. My house is worth maybe 150. I'm looking at close to 100,000 in damage. I had people looking at me right across the conference room table from me, with tears in their eyes, and they said, "We don't know what we're going to do." Well, I know exactly what they did. They went home and they got a couple of friends and they went to Home Depot and they dried the thing out with the equipment that they rented, and they put up new drywall and then they painted. Is that illegal? Absolutely. Are they going to get caught someday? Yes. Well, that day came sooner than we thought, because those are the people that FEMA's going after. And they're going after thousands of homes in these local governments. And that's why I ended it with "now the fun begins," sarcastically, but it's it's a big deal. The city has people working, they don't anymore. They did for 30 days. They had people working round the clock, 12 hours a day. City manager wasn't giving his core people a day off for like 30 days. He made them work 12 hours a day to do all the research. Now they've settled down a little bit to a more regular schedule, but they have until June 30th to show them their side of the story, and then they're going to negotiate again. So Ian was a lot different because of the aftermath. It wasn't as different in terms of the prep, what we did during the event, and immediately after the event with cleanup. Very similar to the other ones I've been involved in that I've worked, about like 5 in different communities, a couple in Naples, Marco, Wilma, and then Ian. But the aftermath is completely different with the fallout. So that's the twist that I wanted to bring to my story tonight. And any questions?
Okay, well, let's get to Q&A in just a sec here, Vince. Good
I'm
news
sorry.
is that you can, if you don't have a disaster plan, there are plenty of those online, and you can begin doing that today. If you don't do anything else and you're in the United States, then one of the best disaster insurance items is a fairly cheap, under $40 NOAA weather radio. Stands silently ready to give you the alert of a tornado. You can't expect your dog or cat to let you know in the middle of the night, or for your phone to ring. And many places that folks had tornadoes and counted on their phones, the tornado warning came 15 minutes on their phone after the tornado. So just another kind of picture of what happened in Cape Coral. So Q&A to either Vince or myself at this point.
I would just make a comment. Back in the 40s and 50s, after a hurricane or whatever, we just went in and rebuilt, and then because it was cheaper to do that and then pay the fine having done it. Of course, now FEMA is the big heavy-handed steel fist that has a lot more to do. So I'm wondering about all those areas south of Venice, Florida, that really got nailed. And I know there's a lot of folks that went in and, as you say, rebuilt, put in their own drywall, did additional improvements, expanded the size of their house or whatever, and said, "Hey, come find me." What's happening?
Well, they may not catch everyone, but they know that goes on in every community. One of the ways that they find out about that is through another technique, and it's not initiated by government. Florida law, and if anyone is already aware of this, I apologize for repeating it, but Florida law now requires that if a contract is entered into through the Florida Bar Association or the Real Estate Association, they have a joint contract. I think this has been in existence a decade or so. It's called the FAR Bar, Florida Association of Realtors Bar Association contract. It's a standard contract. You can get it online. Every lawyer and every realtor in Florida, or lawyer in real estate and every real estate agent has it. you must disclose if there are any improvements made without a permit. And if the buyer insists, 1% of the sales price has to be left in escrow to fix things that were not done without building permits. I don't know about that one, but the first one that I explained is done all the time in these contracts. That's another way it's uncovered. Now, if that happens, does somebody go run into the government? I don't know, but what the government has done is stepped up their code enforcement efforts. One thing I should say, during this whole event and afterwards, we had a lot of people driving around in code enforcement because we saw contractors just out there doing work. So there were people stopped, and we told them, and then some went and did it on their own, and they got hit by code enforcement. And that's another thing the city of Cape Coral is telling FEMA. We have so many cases that we found out on our own. I'm sure the other governments are doing the same thing, but there are more ways to find out about that. And that underlies the big controversy, or one of the controversies. There are people, and I don't know, people want to put a label on this, like they put a label on anything. It's a left-right issue, blue-red, conservative, liberal. There's one school of thought out there that's saying we're tired of subsidizing through our tax dollars people who live near water that shouldn't be living there. But then again, you might not live in a flood zone and you might have a lot of damage. And then you get into your insurance company with wind, water, the whole bit. I hope that never happens to me, because I've heard horror stories about that. I had 5 shingles that were screwed up a little bit. Really, really minor stuff after Ian. I couldn't get a contractor. Who's coming out for like a $700 job? I did it myself. I bought the stuff and which is perfectly legal, from Home Depot and all that, the tar and all that. But there's different ways that's uncovered now. But the local government, the local elected officials, I've never seen them come in and want to do more regulation after these things. I'm not taking a stance on it. They always want to make things a little bit easier, because their reasoning has been something that you just said, Dick, or relates to something you just said. You said back in the 40s and 50s. That's the argument they hear from people. I've been in this house since the 50s, 60s, and 70s. It's all we have. They're not going to want to see that person spend $250,000 to put that house back together when they only might get $100 from FEMA, and they have to remortgage it. They don't want that.
Yeah. The numbers don't work.
Yeah.
Hey, I'd just like to take just a second to recognize Captain Paul Grogan, who is with us tonight. Paul, looks like you're on a ship. Is that true? I think you're still muted there, but yeah, Paul is he's either in Norfolk, Virginia, or heading towards the Eastern Shore, one or the other. Just go down to the lower left corner of your screen, and you should have a mute unmute button there. But at any rate, thanks for joining us, Paul. He's been working on some offshore windmills, among other things, as captain of some very specialized vessels. So thanks for being here, Paul. So at any rate, any other questions from,
Vince, did you have a problem with after the storm with contractors who were not licensed, and in particular out-of-state contractors who would come in and drive around?
Mm-hmm.
The answer is yes, but I've seen over the last 2 or 3 hurricanes that situation has gotten a little bit better for the homeowner, the property owner, and the local government, because there's more mechanisms in place where we have more people patrolling the roads to be able to check and make sure that they're local licensed contractors. And the education has gotten better. We constantly advertise on the website. We were going door to door with flyers, especially in the very heavily damaged areas. We had pre-printed flyers and door hangers saying, "Don't do business unless it's a licensed contractor. Demand to see the license, a contract up front," and so forth. So between education and our own enforcement efforts, we're able to curtail a lot of that. But yes, that does happen a lot, especially with roofing. That
Yeah.
seems to be because they can hide more stuff up there. You can't with electric, you know. It happens all over the place, but if you make a mistake in electric, people are getting hurt really bad. Roofing, they're getting hurt too. It could be a leak and be a cave in or something. But we've seen a lot of improvement in that area.
Yeah. Let me share one thing. During Hurricane Andrew many years ago, which hit around Homestead and just decimated the area, I was still on active duty with Atlantic Command, whose area covered the whole East Coast at the time. And we were made aware of Winnebagos full of looters coming down the coast, heading for Homestead to loot and cause mayhem. So that's in a major decimation. That's an issue which is not commonly known, but which one probably should prepare for.
Okay, so Vince has given us a great angle. This is what happened, but he's also said, well, okay, you got different entities, different government entities, different levels, not always particularly on the same page. He's still working with it. So, Will, what are some of the main things then as an individual that we can do to have the best outcome possible?
Well, number of things, and partly it depends on whether you're talking an individual homeowner or a business. There are different levels of preparation and mitigation things that one can do. At our home, we have done some significant mitigation. My home was built in '57, and I've got 135-mile-an-hour impact windows and my own power system, and just lots of different mitigation things. One, if you're in an area where you may have to evacuate, and not just for storms, but let's say there's a chlorine leak. You're not too far from a municipal swimming pool, and there's lots of chlorine there, pressurized, and you may have to evacuate because of a leak or some truck runs into a tank. You need to have an evacuation plan. And there are also 2 disaster kits you ought to have. You can get this stuff online. One if you stay in your home, one if you evacuate. It's a difference in size and what you bring along with you. So I've got numerous lists of disaster kits that I can send out to anybody who wants one, and a disaster hot tip sheet that tells you a lot of things you may not know, like bridges and causeways generally close it when the wind gets up to 45 miles an hour. So don't wait till the wind gets up and it's howling outside and say, well, Mildred, I guess we better evacuate now, because you may have only one road out. Like here, we have to go north on US 19, which goes through at least 2 sea level dips. So you're not getting out that way either. Paul, on the other hand, is on a ship, so he's okay in floods. But yeah, there are lots of things that an individual can do. And for each county, there is usually an emergency management website where you can go, or you can go to a FEMA site and get information. Does that answer your question, Alicia?
Pretty much in general, yeah.
Yeah, you have to be careful of evacuations. My 8-month pregnant wife and I left St. Pete to avoid a hurricane, went to Winter Haven, and the storm changed path and came through Winter Haven.
Yeah.
So I would suggest Atlanta, Chattanooga, Memphis.
Yeah, Alicia's brother is near Atlanta, so that's one of our evacuation places. Also Ohio.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
I unmuted my phone, so hello and thank you for the shout out.
Sure. Glad to have you there. Are you still in Norfolk or are you at sea?
No, actually, I flew up to Philadelphia. We were at Navy Yard number 2, Dock 2, and then they're building the Merchant Marine Academy's vessels there. And then we took that boat and drove it out at sea to Norfolk, where I got to see 2 submarines, one coming in and one going out. And then we went past the aircraft carriers in Norfolk, went through the railroad bridge and got up on the dry dock. And then I flew from Norfolk back to Berwick, Louisiana. And tomorrow I'll be flying to Florida.
Oh, wow. Well, we're going to keep in touch because and at some point, Paul, I'd like to talk to you about being a guest speaker at the club because you've got some fascinating stuff going on. So just think about that. Think about that.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Well, I enjoyed Vince's presentation as well.
great. And my brother Tim, quick shout out to him. He's in a low-lying area in Hampton, Virginia, so right across from Norfolk. So he's always interested in disaster prep. Okay, any other questions while you have all this expertise here?
I'm just curious about how things are going over in Grand Bahama and the Abacos. Have they dug out very much? Do you know, Vince?
I haven't heard. I can try to find out from the chair of our RLI division, who was the past district governor down there, because Grand Bahama is part of 6990. I can find out.
Well, I just was curious. I know they just got totally flattened. I mean, it was total disaster.
Mm-hmm.
Jim Hunt, you're still up in Ohio, right? Is that true?
That is true.
Okay, all right.
I don't miss this.
Yeah. And Michelle, you're in Puerto Rico still, right?
Yes, and as a matter of fact, I was going to ask you guys, I don't know if you've heard about the sun flares that are going on right now that are hitting us pretty badly. I have some friends of mine that live in South Africa, and they were telling us the last 2 days they've had no internet or it's really bad. Do you guys know if anything will affect us? It doesn't seem like it will because I know some of the wires may be underground, but I don't know if, anything concerning the sun flares that we need to be aware of.
I think the storm is now passing and subsiding. It was like 7 individual coronal mass ejections, some which were called cannibal, which
8.9 was today. We got hit one with 8.9.
really not particularly.
We had
good.
some funky issues with our internet.
Yeah.
When we called the company, they said, well, somebody cut a fiber optic cable. And so Will got in touch with a buddy of his whose internet is through a different company, and he was having problems. And they said the same thing. Somebody
cut a fiber optic cable.
that was the story du jour.
Yeah, it was probably all due to the sunspot
Flares. Okay.
activity. Yeah. But years ago, there were the entire power grid of Quebec went down in a big solar storm, and transformers were destroyed, big high value transformers. And of course, in around 1859 or so, the famous Carrington event, this is before rural electrification, that event was so strong, the largest in recorded history, that it actually burned down telegraph stations by inducing current, and the telegraph operators disconnected their batteries and they could still operate. This is before you had long wire electrical systems.
Amazing.
So if that were to happen today, I hesitate to tell you what the consequences would be. It's basically back to the Stone Age for 5 to 10
You're
years.
sending up smoke signals.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, not good. All this
I-
technology, you know, satellites and everything. Yeah, Paul.
Thank you, guys.
I have a suggestion if you're living in the remote areas that just so you guys know, my fisherman friends in Alaska have been using Starlink for over 3 years. And now Carnival has decided to put it on every one of their ships because it reduces the latency. When it comes to emergency preparedness, if you have an RV or camper or something that's mobile, or even a garage to put it in, it wouldn't hurt to have one of those antennas because even in some pretty rough seas, the Wi-Fi has on the vessel has maintained its connectivity. And
Wow.
that's pretty
That's fun
powerful
here.
and a plus for Starlink working in highly remote areas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that Celebrity Cruise Lines has it too. We took advantage of it this past year.
Yeah.
So
My
yeah,
brother
more
has
and more
one here.
entities. Mhm. So,
I'm on the internet right now with Starlink.
Who are you?
Yes, and it was affected by the last couple of days. So there's nothing foolproof.
no,
Right. Right.
you just have to maybe have different avenues and one works better than the other.
Yeah. There is a very little known system called meteor burst that actually works better during solar storms than anything else. The worse the ionization in the atmosphere, the better meteor burst works. And it works by sending little data packages across the ionized micrometeorite trails. And it's good for, I think, 1,200 miles at a hop. But that's another subject. The military uses that, along with Department of Commerce and all these remote sensors that are in the middle of nowhere to forecast, you know, earthquakes and rain and all that kind of thing.
So the systems are out there. The resources are out there. It's just that, like Vince said, with one point is getting the education out there. And that's the big thing. You need people to realize, not just know it, not just hear it, but realize what could happen.
Yeah. It's not so much what you don't know that'll hurt you. It's what you know that ain't so.
Yeah.
There you go. All right. Well, anything else for this evening? We've had a full hour.
Okay. Thanks
I
so
just,
much for all of you being here. Yeah.
I just add one more thing. If you call your phone company and tell them that you're working with response efforts, they can switch your phone over to the emergency service, and you'll actually have phone service when other people don't. But you just have to be registered for it up beforehand.
Cool.
Good.
Thank you for letting us know. Do you guys
Thank you.
remember when Nexus, or was it that phone when the 4 hurricanes hit in Florida? And
Yeah.
all of us that had like Nexus, I think it was called, we didn't have a phone because everything went to the emergency broadcast.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
That was terrible. We
Yeah.
had a phone for like a week. But thank you for letting us know about that, Paul.
Okay, great. Good to see you all.
Okay. Oh, we can end our meeting with the 4-way test as we usually do. Is it the truth?
Truth.
Is it
fair
fair
to
to
all
all
concerned?
concerned? Will it build
Build
goodwill,
goodwill,
better
better
friendships.
friendships? Will it be beneficial to all
Beneficial to all
concerned?
All concerned.
And is it fun?
Why not? Of course.
The five-way test.
The 5-way test, yeah. I think the light's on.